On the evening of April 6, 1994, a presidential aircraft carrying the president of Rwanda and the president of Burundi, both Hutus, was shot down near Kigali International Airport in Rwanda. The attack was done using a surface-to-air missile, killing both presidents. This death triggered one of the worst massacres in world history, and a civil war that spread across many African nations and involved many different armed militia groups. One important question that has remained unanswered to this day is, who killed Habyarimana? In this edition of History Media, we dive into the story of the assassination of President Juvenal Habyarimana and President Cyprien Ntaryamira with one missile shot in 1994. Please come with me, Gabriel here. But first, with just about 26,000 square kilometers, Rwanda is one of the smallest countries in Africa when compared to its southern neighbor, Burundi. The tiny landlocked nation, which is situated just south of the equator, shares border with Zaire, now Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi. But this country and Burundi share some interesting things in common. They are both inhabited by the same ethnic people, the Hutu and the Tutsi. Between 1890 and 1962, Rwanda and Burundi were one country known as Rwanda-Urundi and was briefly under the control of Germany and Belgium. In 1962, Rwanda-Urundi gained independence and broke into two separate countries, Rwanda dominated by Hutu and Burundi dominated by the Tutsi. However, inter-ethnic rivalry between these two groups of people will result in decades of mistrust and bloody armed conflict. This conflict will spread across different nations and involve many different armed militia groups in the region. Initially, the conflict arose as a result of colonial policy of divide and conquer, in which Germany and Belgium ruled through kings and perpetuated a pro-Tutsi policy. However, a much more devastating uprising erupted in 1994 when the president of Rwanda, Juvenal Habyarimana, and the president of its southern neighbor, Burundi, Cyprien Ntaryamira, were assassinated on April 6, 1994. We will get to the actual story in a moment, but as alluded to earlier, a bloody conflict between the majority Hutu tribe and the minority Tutsi has plagued both tiny Central African nations for centuries. At that time, the crisis was particularly bad in Burundi, where up to 100 people have been killed since the assassination of the country's first democratically elected president. President Melchior Ndadaye, a Hutu president of Burundi, was assassinated in a coup attempt by a Tutsi-dominated faction of the army on the 21st of October 1993. However, in Rwanda, Habyarimana had set up a one-party state in which tight central control was joined with an initially successful push for economic development. But by the late 1980s, after a decade and a half in power, his political control was eroding and the economy was in shambles. In October 1990, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF, a rebel group led by Tutsi, launched a guerrilla war against the country from Ugandan border. The RPF was led by Paul Kagame and other children of Tutsi who had fled the country following the 1959 Hutu Revolution. They were fighting for the right of Tutsi refugees to return home and ultimately to overthrow the Hutu-led government of Habyarimana. In June 1992, RPF troops won a substantial foothold in Rwandan territory, and this was followed by the start of a protracted peace negotiation between the RPF and the Rwandan government. The negotiations finally produced the Arusha Accords that were concluded in August 1993 and were intended to end the war. However, the Arusha Accords have failed to agree on a transitional government and were opposed by many Hutus, including some in the government. For instance, one officer, the head of military intelligence, warned that giving too much concession to the RPF could provoke a coup against Habyarimana himself. He also warned of the consequences of a possible future RPF advances and also left a threat, kind of. The officer said that in the event of RPF advances, the military will kill the political leaders responsible for concessions to the RPF and the population would massacre the Tutsi before fleeing the country. This is more or less an indication that the genocide was foretold. But that is not the actual focus of this video. A detailed video on the Rwandan genocide would come later. But how was President Habyarimana killed? Well, here is the actual story. Shortly before 8:20 p.m. local time on April 6, 1994, a Dassault Falcon 50 presidential jet with registration number 9XRUNN carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and the President of Burundi, Cyprien Ntaryamira, circled once over Kigali International Airport, preparing to land. Then, the jet came in for a second and final approach in clear skies. Meanwhile, a weekly flight by a Belgian C-130 Hercules carrying United Nations Army troops returning from leave had been scheduled to land before the president's jet, but was waved off to give the president priority. As the plane circled for the second time, 2 surface-to-air missiles were fired. The first missile hit one of the wings of the aircraft and the second missile hit its tail. The plane immediately erupted into flame in mid-air before it crashed into the garden of the presidential palace and exploded. The 2 presidents were among a group of 12 passengers in the plane. They were returning from a meeting of East and Central African leaders in Tanzania, at which they discussed ways to end the ethnic violence in Burundi and Rwanda. During the summit in Dar es Salaam, President Juvenal Habyarimana made a commitment to integrate fighters of the RPF into the armed forces and to hold elections for a new and all-inclusive national government. But that was not allowed to happen in the end. Eyewitness accounts explain how the plane was shot down. The attack on the presidential jet was witnessed by several people, including a Belgian officer in Kanombe. The officer saw the first missile launch, a red flash, and also saw as the aircraft engine went off. He immediately contacted Major de Saint-Quentin, a member of the French team attached to the Rwandan Paracommando Battalion. In the same vein, another Belgian officer stationed in the neglected airport control tower witnessed as the aircraft was approaching and saw a light moving upward from the ground. Immediately, he saw that the aircraft's light had went off. This was followed by a second light emerging from the same location, and the plane turned into a tumbling ball of fire. The officer promptly radioed his company commander, who confirmed to the operational control tower that the jet was a presidential aircraft. A Rwandan soldier in the military camp in Kanombe recalled what happened. He said, quote, "You know, its engine sounds different from other planes. That is the president's engine sound. We were looking towards where the plane was coming from, and we saw a projectile, and we saw a ball of flame or flash, and we saw the plane go down, and I saw it. I was the leader of the block, so I asked the soldiers to get up, and I told them, get up, because Kinani, a Kinyarwanda nickname for Habyarimana, meaning famous or invincible, has been shot down. They told me, you are lying. I said, it is true. So I opened my wardrobe, I put on my uniform, and I heard the bugle sound." End of quote. But who killed President Habyarimana and Cyprien Ntaryamira? Well, responsibility for this assassination attack is still highly disputed, even to this day. While most theorists blame the Tutsi rebel groups, Rwandan Patriotic Front, others place the blame on government-aligned Hutu power extremists. As alluded to earlier, the Hutu power extremists were opposed to government negotiations with the RPF. However, immediately after the death of Habyarimana, it was alleged that his jet was shot down by Russian-made SAM-16 missile from a valley in the vicinity of the airport by operatives of the Rwandan Patriotic Front led by then-leader Major Paul Kagame. This position was reinforced in 2004 after an inquiry by French Judge Jean-Louis Bourgueria. In a 2018 book entitled In Praise of Blood, The Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, Judy River alleged that Kagame and his inner military circle held a series of 3 meetings in late 1993 and early 1994 to plan to shoot down the plane. The commanders present at the meeting were alleged to have included Colonel Kayumba Nyanwasa, Colonel Stephen Ndugute, Colonel Sam Kaka, Lieutenant Colonel James Kabarebe, and Major Jack Nziza. The RPF commanders agreed to train the team to handle 2 surface-to-air missiles that the RPF had secured from its ally in Uganda. This team brought the weapons from the northern Rwanda into the capital and stationed in a farm in Masaka. It has been alleged that the second missile that destroyed the plane was shot by Sergeant Frank Nziza of the RPF. But Paul Kagame has vehemently denied the allegations. However, an excerpt from a report published by freelance journalist Frederick Helbert concludes that the 2 missiles, of which the second brought down the plane, could have been fired from the Kanombe military base. This ruled out the possibility that the missile could have been fired from the farm at Masaka. In October 2007, the RPF-led Rwandan government launched a formal investigation into the plane crash. The results, released in January 2010, indicated that Hutu extremist soldiers were responsible for shooting down the plane carrying President Habyarimana. Their intention was to derail his peace negotiation with Tutsi rebels and then use the incident as an excuse to initiate the genocide against Tutsis and moderate Hutu. This inquiry also finds evidence of a plot to assassinate the former president. This dated back months before the actual event occurred and was predicted by a number of print and electronic media houses allied to the extreme wing of the ruling party. But what happened after the president was assassinated? Well, a day after the president was killed, all hell broke loose. Hutu soldiers assassinated Prime Minister Agatha Uwiligi-Amana and her husband, and then kidnapped the Belgian peacekeepers who had been sent to protect her. They took them to the main military barracks where they lynched them. Tutsis living in Hutu-controlled areas were targeted and killed. Likewise, Hutus living in RPF-controlled areas were tracked down and slaughtered as well. This will continue for the next 100 days, resulting in the Rwandan genocide. But within days after the death of the president, RPF launched a major offensive on Kigali. By April 12, only 6 days into the large-scale slaughter, at least 4 RPF battalions were seen in Kigali. The same day, April 12, senior Hutu officers from the Rwandan armed forces formally requested the RPF to join forces with them in a bid to stop the carnage. They also called for an immediate ceasefire, but the RPF would not agree to this. With President Habyarimana out of the way, the RPF would take advantage of the chaos to seize power. This was their objective all along, and that was exactly what they achieved amidst the massacre. Click here for the story of the assassination of President Laurent Desire Kabila of the DRC by his own former child soldier. For more interesting stories like these, please leave a like on this one and subscribe to Hisbro Media. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.